Welcome to Todd Neef's show, where I talk to interesting people and try to unpack their mental models and learn out loud, mostly for my benefit, but hopefully you folks listening get something out of these conversations as well. This week we have Ethan Lee McCarthy from the band Primitive Man, from the project Many Blessings, from the other band Vermin, and Ethan is a prolific and impressive songwriter, guitarist, vocalist. We spend a lot of time talking about dissonance and how he thinks about creating really just harrowing visual and sonic soundscapes, since Ethan is both a musician and a visual artist. Primitive Man has some pretty wild videos associated with their new record, which just came out. So you should go check out those videos and pick up the record. We also talk about some of Ethan's involvements in live music in Denver and just the potential impacts of COVID upon such activities. So check out this conversation with Ethan Lee McCarthy of the band Primitive Man and watch his videos, but not before bed. So Ethan, with Primitive Man and all of your other myriad of musical projects, there tends to be a lot of dissonance, right? Things sound unpleasant, uncomfortable, can be a little bit harsh. And the way that you sort of create those structures, even though the genres for these different projects can be very different, that there's like some sort of thread tying those pieces together, at least to an outside listener. So my first question for you is, do you think about the sort of like dissonant soundscape of something like Primitive Man as being similar to, some of the harsh noise stuff that you create, or grindcore, or are these like different projects that just kind of end up having a similar thread?
I mean, I use dissonance in everything that I do because I feel like it makes things heavier and it communicates shit super raw. I am always striving to make things that, most of the shit that I do is unpleasant. I mean, to people who aren't into that specific thing, noise or doom or grindcore or whatever. So I don't know. I just feel like it's the best way to communicate intensity and heaviness is by making it sound fucked up, Like I don't like a lot of like really melodic kind of shit. You know what I mean? It just doesn't go for the throat as much, I guess.
Yeah, that's very reasonable. That making stuff sound fucked up can make it heavier. So with we're talking about like these very dissonant chords that you use and kind of abrasive changes and things like that. Are you thinking? Do you just sort of have like a palette of like gross chords that are like, all right, if I hit these strings together, this is going to sound real bad? Like how are you thinking about that?
I mean, yeah, I have stuff that I've figured out over the years that does a specific thing. I still try to find new stuff too. I'm not like trained in guitar or anything. Like I know a little bit, but I really don't know shit. So, so I'm just kind of trying to fuck around and make things that sound nasty on my own. But from doing that over the years and most of the bands that I've been in, I kind of have like a better idea of how to play that way. You know what I mean? Like just kind of happens. So I feel like I've really grown into playing that way from doing it for so long. Whereas before I was like really having to search for what that was, like I could hear what it was, but I couldn't really, I wouldn't be able to describe it to you or say it's just dissonance in playing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. And were there specific things that you heard that you maybe weren't able to parse or categorize, or like, oh, that's the bad sound that I want?
Yeah. So, okay. So, I've been listening to metal since I was super young. And when I discovered Incantation, I would always like say to my friends, I was like, because, we were listening to Morbid Angel and Cannibal Corpse and, Slayer and all this shit. But I was like, in Immolation even. And I would talk about Immolation and Incantation. I would be like, there's like something about these bands, it sounds more evil than all the other bands. Like, I don't know how they do it. Like, that's what I used to kind of say to those dudes. And then I discovered Today Is the Day and like Godflesh and stuff like that. And a lot of the like picking your instrument fucked up and aggressively and stuff came from that. And so then I kind of like started to put these worlds together from all this kind of shit, you know, and then I discovered Neurosis and Crowbar and all that other stuff for the speed. So it was really just about like me taking little pieces of all these things and trying to make it, put them all together.
Yeah.
Kind of makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, I guess that something that I think is really interesting with the, I guess just like dissonant palettes that you use, right, is that it is just, you know, constantly abrasive, which is awesome. And it almost sounds like you have, you know, let's say like a space in like the musical palette that, you know, like, okay, this is the spot that sounds this specific way, and then there's sort of like negative space around it, and you're able to just like keep moving that shape into the different negative spaces to just create like a wall of oppression.
I mean, yeah. Well, so I guess the reason that I gave you that long-winded answer before is because it's like I all those bands I mentioned will let up on what they're doing, and so I didn't want to let up, and so that's kind of part of the idea, is that because you're trying to be fucking harsh all the time, you have to move it around and be able to have variety within that realm.
Yeah. So how do you think about creating that variety? Because again, it's something that, you know, you can sort of pick up on as a listener, but I think that that's, you know, a huge part of the whatever creative output that you've had. Like how do you move that around?
Well, I mean, my bandmates help a lot, you know, with like putting the songs together and all that kind of shit. It's hard to, like, I never want to repeat myself, but there's also like a stylistic thing in there where everything is going to kind of sound like us, or you know, my riffing is just going to sound like me, because I've been playing like myself for so many years. So, you know, a lot of times what I'll do is that I'll know what it's going to be like through my lens, and then I might like hear something that inspires me, and I might try to I just try to have my take on shit that I like, and that kind of helps. And I listen to such a wide variety of music, and I take influence from such a wide variety of music, not just metal, that I think that that's really what kind of helps me do that. You know what I mean? Is I'm like, oh, well, how would I play that? You know what I mean? And that could be from any crazy shit, like some rap to Disembowelment, or, you know, Evoking, or something like that, or Neurosis, or any of this kind of shit. I listen to like a lot of noise and stuff, and the thing I like about noise, you know, the harsh aspect of it. So I'm like, well, how can I make that on the guitar? You know what I mean? So I guess that's kind of how, is it's just staying inspired and like trying to kind of do it my way, you know?
Yeah. Do you have an example of how you might take something that you're like, oh, this is a cool idea, and I want to turn it into something that, you know, that I would do my way, right? That I would take this as a seed for either you know, a riff or an idea or something that you might improvise based upon. What does that look like?
Okay, so there's a song on the new record called Entity, and
that's one of the ones that has a video out, correct?
Yeah, it's the latest one we put out.
Yeah.
And, you know, that song has like a build up through it, and it's like guitar by itself a lot, and then the drums and the bass are we're like building this thing, and it goes for like 2.5 minutes. I was listening to like a ton of Haxan Cloak at the time, and really like that kind of stuff, like Lawrence English and other like electronic soundscape artists. And I the thing about that kind of stuff is it's not like the heaviest thing in the world, but the vibe is so intense that it may as well be a metal thing. So, listening to this stuff, taking a bunch of walks, listening to this shit, super cinematic and all that. And I'm like, well, I want to do that with Primitive Man. I'm gonna bring this over here, and we're gonna figure out how we're gonna do the same kind of thing. So that's like the most recent example I can think of.
Yeah, that's fascinating because I think that Primitive Man occupies a really interesting space in terms of, let's say, song structure, right? Because it's not fully atmospheric or what have you, right? It's not like fully deconstructed, just droning stuff like maybe SUNN or, maybe some of the electronic soundscape stuff that you mentioned, nor is it something that's doom metal with a more, let's say, just traditional folk song structure, right? I mean, you can take it, Black Sabbath and the derivatives thereof, which are, just kind of like rock songs slowed down with different note choices, right? Primitive Man is in between those two spaces where it's like there is a song structure, but it also has this much more, like you mentioned, okay, this is more of a soundscape than like, here's the verse and chorus. So how do you build that structure then?
We really build off of each other a lot. So I might come in with an idea, and Joe will kind of start to figure out drums. Then when John comes in and like fills that low end and that rhythm, we'll kind of jam on some stuff for a little bit, play the riff like 32 times or whatever, and just kind of really get a feel for it. And then keep like fucking around with the song and other parts and doing all these things. Then when we come back to it, because we know what we're doing, a lot of times I'll come up with like a variation in between that, and that'll like help us build from there. It's really, it used to be me just like writing riffs and bringing them. Now it is really us vibing, and I think that's just because the lineup is really strong and close, and we're able to do that now. Before, it wasn't necessarily that way. Which is why I think that we sound a little bit different. People will say, oh, it's like the same shit. And I get it. I mean, it does. It sounds like us still. But I feel like we've changed in that our song structures have changed a little bit because we build off of each other more so than ever. And so this record is just like is that the whole way through,
And is there a role of improvisation in that? Is that like, okay, we're going to get together and just here's the chord changes and we're just going to jam on it? Or is it more let's try this part, or how does that work?
Well, so that's kind of what I'm saying. So, when I come with a riff, we'll play it a bunch of times, and then someone will just kind of like start throwing spice in that shit while we're playing it. So there's a certain, so it's improvised in that, but we do have like a riff or a goal in mind, and then we're building the riffs on top of each other and like kind of switching them around. The best way I can explain it is it's like a movie on the cutting room floor. And a lot of picking shit up and putting it together and then jamming on it and making variations within it and all that. But the base idea is always just like it has to be super crushing. So we're trying to take all those pieces and then filter them through that shit. Like it has to be intense the whole time kind of thing.
Yeah. Like you mentioned previously, you don't want to let up at all during the entire thing.
No, like even the cleaner parts we have and stuff are still kind of harsh. I mean, it's really about being horrific, admittedly. Like, I'm not going to pretend like, oh no, that we're not doing that shit on purpose. Like, it is on purpose to be as heavy and as harsh and horrific as possible. Because to me, the best metal bands now, that's what it is. It's pushing the genre into this like insane realm where it's almost unlistenable. I love that shit, and I think that, not to like get too off topic, but I think that noise music is an extension of that. It's like the furthest you can get of insanity. So it's like if you do that with a band, that's the way. You know?
Yeah. It's the way.
That's
the way.
You know, I love bands like that. Like I love like controversial ass band, but I love Revenge for that because it's just like they don't give a shit. It's fucking insane, you know. Or like Nelt wrote when they were around. I mean, it was just like that second to last record they put out, Trespass, is just like, oh, gee, this might as well have been a fucking Harsh Noise record. This is sick.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, well, because I think that for a while, decades ago, you know, the progression was like, okay, let's play faster, let's play more technical, and you sort of hit a point where you can't really play that much faster, right? That you can't play that much more technical.
No, and the thing is with technical though is you lose, and people will hate this shit that I said this. But if you're too technical, you lose intensity because you're really trying to not fuck up and you're trying to be clean and all this shit. If you're talking about like technically proficient on the neck or whatever, you know what I mean? So we sacrifice being technical a little bit, you know, to be insane, because someone playing their guitar like a maniac sounds mad heavy. You know, so it was about being faster, but now I think it's like we've heard it with a lot of technical bands. They've taken it as fast as it can go. So, you know, it's like to really build on that, I feel like you need to be harsh and you need to sacrifice a little bit of that shit on the guitar, you know?
Sure.
But the older I get, the more insane I want it to be. And so I have like a super fucked up opinion about this that most people probably don't agree with. So...
It's good though. Hey, if you have an opinion that people don't agree with, but you're right, you know, that's not a bad spot to be.
I mean, heavy music should continue to to get heavier. You know, I think that's always been the thing. Some people don't want to do that. I don't think that everyone has to play it. There's a space for everybody. But you know, me personally, my thing is I just want to keep building on being heavy.
Yeah.
Until I can't figure it out anymore.
Totally. And if you think about progression into further heaviness, right, that there's a point where it kind of dissolves and it's not necessarily songs anymore, right? And then you do have stuff that is more just like harsh noise, or just straight up drone or what have you. And that figuring out a way to continue to progress that heaviness and that harshness without totally dissolving the song. I mean, that sounds like at least a partially unexplored region.
I mean, you know? I want to live in between both worlds. Like, I want to be able to have a little bit of that. I mean, we want to rock and shit, but I just, I also want to do it in this specific way. So, yeah, I mean, I think that until you go full wall of noise, at least for us, this is the way that we've kind of figured out to have a little bit of both.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like that I mean, again, I sort of said this before, but to me, it's like, okay, you're sort of like painting with dissonance, right? It's like, okay, here's this part, and then here's the negative space in this part. Like, let's paint that part over. But still, like you said, maintaining some level of, you know, okay, this part actually has like a kind of a part that kicks in. You're like, oh yeah, here it is.
Yeah. I mean, we'll give it up to you every like 8 minutes. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I still like rocking out and shit and traditional metal. Like, you know, I still love all that stuff. It's just our thing is we want to have that and be as extreme as possible, you know. Yeah. And also, we were all in fast bands before, so you know, doing it in a slower band is like also a little bit, in my opinion, is like a little bit more of a challenge. It's easier to write faster stuff, at least for me. You know what I mean? When you're playing slow, everyone hears exactly what you're doing, especially when you're the only guitar player. So it has to be purposeful.
Yeah, that the speed enables you to just kind of like gloss over stuff or whatever, right? It's
Yeah.
similar with like movement quality or something on like a squat or whatever. It's like if you just do it fast, you can kind of get away with some stuff sometimes.
Right. Well, we were talking about that level where you go before it's just harsh noise. It's like, okay, well, so to me, I love like that band Impetuous Ritual. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah.
They're fucking insane, dude. But that shit sounds like it is just like, it just sounds like a being. It doesn't even sound like a band. You know what I mean? Like they have taken it to that level, but the drums with the like in there kind of like keeps it together, so they do it on that fast end, you know what I mean? But if one of those, but I've seen those guys live twice. If one of those guys fucked up, I wouldn't have been able to tell because it just sounds crazy. It's so fast, except for the doom parts, but it's so fucking crazy fast. So yeah, sorry, I had to get a little sidetracked.
Yeah, no, I mean, but that is super interesting, right? Where it's like, okay, there's this whatever structure that, like you said, you can't even necessarily pick up on what's going on as a listener. And then sometimes you wonder too, okay, how much is this actually planned and how much is this actually structured, right? I mean, you can take a band like, are you familiar with U.S. Maple?
No, not really.
Yeah, they're like a Chicago, there was like a wave of no wave-ish stuff in Chicago.
Write it down.
Yeah. Yo, it's awesome. U.S. Maple. Yeah. U.S. Maple is one of my favorite bands. The record Sang Fat Editor, I think, is their best one, but I celebrate most of their catalog. But they're a band that, that, like I said, there was a no wave-ish type of thing going on in Chicago in the 90s. And some of their stuff just sounds like pure nonsense. But if you watch live videos of them playing, it's like they played literally the exact same thing perfectly every single time.
And I was amazed at that shit with Impetuous Ritual also, because I was like, oh, fuck, I actually know these songs. Yeah, that's the good shit.
Yeah, it's like, okay, here's the part that sounds like pure nonsense. I can't wait for that part.
Yeah. But, I feel like if you listen to enough of this stuff and you're exposed to it, it doesn't sound so foreign anymore. It takes, nothing will fucking shock me now. I feel like I'm really waiting for a band to come out that is like that first time I heard Portal or the first time I heard Impetuous Ritual, like this kind of shit. I was just like, oh my God. Like I couldn't believe that it got heavier than Incantation, whatever, you know what I mean? So I'm like,
yeah,
I'm waiting for someone else to do that kind of shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So if Primitive Man is kind of trying to push the heaviness frontiers forward in this sort of like dissonant, slow soundscape space, do you think there's other unexplored territory that you see as far as like where someone could go to create like another round of heaviness?
Well, I mean, so for us on our journey, we've already like started writing new songs and shit, and we've been putting a bunch of new shit in there that we haven't done yet, and are really trying to build on the idea more so, especially because there's all this time we can try. Like we always had tours coming up, Yeah. So now that we don't, we have all this time to kind of try some stuff. So I don't know. I feel like there's almost limitless possibilities because you can pull from any genre the harshest or hardest or heaviest aspect of it and use it. Like, yeah. I feel like there's so many possibilities within that realm, but it's such an acquired taste to play dissonant and kind of listenable, that I don't think it's been tapped out at all. Most people don't really want to do that, They want to keep it somewhat palatable.
Totally.
So I don't know. I think limitless possibilities.
Yeah, and I think that something that is a lot of innovation or attempted innovation is just like smashing genres together, which I don't think is necessarily truly innovative, right? Just be like, oh yeah, we're going to have like this kind of part and then this kind of part, right? That there's a difference between smashing genres together and then, like you're talking about where it's like, okay, we're going to try to take these ideas from more of like a electronic soundscape and apply it to dissonant doom metal, right? Which is like, that's unexplored territory rather than just like, I don't know, folding a piece of paper together. If that makes sense.
Well, and the thing is, I listen to a lot of doom. I love that shit. But I don't want to rip off the bands I like, I don't want to sound like them. I want to enjoy them and not think it, and not go and rehearse and sound like it. You know what I mean? I don't want to do that. So I think that's a lot of the reason why I started to take influence from other places, is because of that reason. I want to sound like me. I don't want to sound like them. I don't want to write the same record as a lot of them. I mean, it would have been really easy for me like 15 years ago to just make a band that sounded like Neurosis and just like roll with it. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
that's not.
You should make a band that sounds like crossover era Neurosis.
They're too good to rip off. You can't play that shit. No matter what era it is, shouldn't do that. But I got sidetracked. What I was saying.
Yeah. Well, let's. I want to ask you about your visual art as well, right? Because I mean, the videos that have come out for the new Primitive Man stuff and previous Primitive Man videos, like you said before, have been, horrific, harrowing, upsetting. You've done a lot of visual art for other bands as well. I mean, you actually did the art for the Hate Force record that we put out a few years ago. And so that's another thread kind of tying stuff together. What's the relationship between your visual art and your musical art? Is it coming from the same place, or these different things that just kind of end up smashed together? What's that?
Well, if I'm making it for us, it's with intent. If I'm making it for someone else, it's from inspiration from what they're doing. If I'm just making things for myself that are not music related, like Prince or whatever other shit, it might come from like the same frame of mind as some Primitive Man stuff, but I also touch on a lot of issues that I don't touch on with Primitive Man. So,
like what?
Well, so I'll like talk a little bit about politics in Primitive Man, but I talk about it more like, this is how I'm affected by this fucking situation that we're living. You know what I mean? And it's more about like my experience within it. Whereas like if I make stuff for Hell Simulation, it's like, I'm like, hey, this person or this policy or this thing or this scenario about America is a total piece of garbage, and here's 3 paragraphs on why I think it's fucking garbage. You know what I mean? So it's like a little bit more direct, and it's like super. It's because there's no music with it. I make it mad confrontational. I think it's just like the same philosophy I have with everything. It's just like I'm just like trying to like really get my fucking point across, and even when I'm making stuff for others, like with that Hate Force record that you mentioned, that's like one of my favorite things I've ever done for another band was the artwork for that one.
Yeah. I mean, when you sent it, it was like, yep, nailed it.
No, man, I'm like super proud of that one. I remember when I got done with it, I was like, I almost don't want to give this to them. But I love Drew and all them. So yeah, man, I mean, I just think it just kind of depends on the project. It's from a similar place, but the frame of mind might be like a little bit different. Like Primitive Man is like super introspective when I'm making this stuff, and the art really reflects the things I'm talking about and whatever else. With Hell Simulation, it's just like, which is just like what I call my art stuff. It's just kind of like, I don't want to say it's like more open and honest, but it kind of is, because all it is just words and images. There's not like a wall of insanity in front of it.
Well, it sounds like it's maybe not more honest, but it's more literal.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, literal is a better.
I'm an art critic.
No, I mean literal is a better word for it. Yeah.
Because in the music, like you're saying, you're sort of abstracting whatever through your own emotional experience and through, the actual musical desire, right? Because I mean, music is like almost a separate thing where it's like, okay, I want this to create this thing that feels like this or that sounds like this. Whereas with a piece of visual art, you can probably do the same thing, but it's also like, okay, I can just like literally write what I want people to take away from this.
Right. And the thing is that I'm not really speaking on anything that people don't know anything about. Like, everyone knows who the fuck Donald Trump is. You know what I mean? Everyone knows what's going on around us right now. It's like when I'm talking about stuff in lyrics for bands, it's like about a personal scenario. It's like left up to interpretation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess I am a little bit curious about that in terms of, because there are plenty of bands that are like literal and political in, that way, right? I mean, you can, off the top of my head, I'm thinking of a bunch of like hip hop artists. I just listened to an interview with Boots Riley from the Coup, right? Which was a really good interview, right? And it's like, okay, you basically just say these exact same things in your music, right? And for those not familiar, he's actually like I never saw the movie that he made, but I guess that thing was kind of huge. He made a movie a few years ago that did very well, and I was like, wait, what? I totally missed this.
What was it called?
I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I'll find it and I'll put it in the show notes. And I was like, okay, I definitely need to see this. I guess it was some sort of like dark comedy, what have you. And I'm super curious about it, right? But to sort of circle back, right? I mean, the Coup is like a very like radical leftist, Marxist hip hop group, right? Like very politically charged lyrics. Like there's no confusion about where they stand on class struggle and things like that, right? And in, in an interview with him, it's like, cool, you're going to get basically the same type of stuff, right? But it's not abstracted through like any sort of metaphor or whatever. It's just like, this is what I think. And do you think that metal lends itself less to that type of thing? Or like, other genres like punk do tend to be more literally political? What do you think?
I think it just depends on the band. I mean,
yeah.
Punk has the reputation of being more political, but I think it really depends on the bands. I think you can do whatever the fuck you want. Some people, no one's gonna like it. Like someone's not gonna like the shit you're saying. You know what I mean? No matter what it is. So, I think that the heavy music is kind of that people are political all over the spectrum of that shit. So,
yeah,
Punk
absolutely.
just holds the torch for it.
Well, to sort of circle back to the visual art stuff, I mean, you're sort of starting to talk about like, okay, this is maybe a more literal reflection of my opinions and my beliefs than the music that you create. I think you maybe said in another interview, or I may have just like picked this up somewhere, just some ideas about like mistrust, disinformation, etc. And that's prominent in your visual art stuff. Is that sort of like just a general theme for your work?
I mean, right now, because I feel like shit is fucked, man. You don't know what the information that you're getting. The fake news thing is so fucked up to me. And I know that we haven't always been privy to the truth or whatever in a lot of things, but maybe I'm just old enough to notice more so now. I just really think that it's fucked up that we have to put up with fake news and not really know what's going on, and that each side of the coin is being told different shit. It's like, we need fucking facts so that we can save our fucking lives. Like, this shit isn't a game. I don't understand why it is allowed to be played like this. It's fucked. Like, the fake news thing has got me so fucked up. I can't stand it. So yeah. I've been talking a lot about it now because I feel like if everyone could just see the truth for like actual non-biased ass truth, that we would have a lot of things kind of start to work out a little bit better than they are right now. Because right now, everyone is against each other and shit is super fucking crazy and it sucks. I mean, don't want to talk too much about this virus shit, but that in itself, it's like half the population believes it's a hoax or whatever, and then the other half is like has been inside of their house since March. Fucking scary.
Yeah, and everyone involved in that feels very bad about it in both directions.
Right, absolutely. And the thing of it is, too, it's like with fucking Trump, it's like all the people that love Trump, they have news presented to them that makes them believe that he's not a piece of shit. Now, on that particular issue, I'm like, bitch, you need to wake the fuck up. However, I understand. You know what I'm saying? Like, I understand that they're seeing things different from us, and I just feel like it shouldn't fucking happen. Like, we should know what the fuck they're doing, and it should be super clear for everyone to know what they're doing. And with shit like this virus, we should get clear fucking information that is real. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't understand why that's so much to ask. So yeah, it's a super big issue for me right now.
Yeah, and to your point about that, I think it's the current climate. The assumption is that no matter what the information is being presented, is that it's being presented with an agenda, right? That there's almost everything is taken as like the worst, most bad faith version of someone's argument, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, you shouldn't wear masks. Well, they're just, trying to save masks for people who actually need them. Okay, you do need to wear a mask. No, it's really just an attempt to subdue people and to, create political discord and stuff like that, right? That everything is assumed to have some sort of nefarious motivation behind it.
What the fuck is that shit? It's just like. So, when I make this art, I really dive deep into both sides of what the fuck is going on, because I want to get a pulse on the people on everywhere, and I want to see what's going on. And it is crazy to me how many people think that the mask thing, like there's people that go way off the deep end with this shit, that it's like, they're going to be microchipping us because they need to see that we're going to be okay with wearing masks. I'm like, hold the fuck on. Wearing a mask and getting a fucking microchip are way different.
Yeah, because you're a lib.
But no, I'm not a lib. That's the thing, is I would never describe myself as a liberal. Like, I have all sorts of shit that I don't fucking agree with liberals. The thing is I'm like, motherfucker, really, if they're like, all right, well, you wore the mask, you did this, now we're going to give you the chip, and then you can just buy things with waving your wrist over the fucking scanner. I'd be like, bitch, no way would I ever do that. Like, and I think it's insane for them to assume that people would. Getting a microchip is some psychotic ass shit. Who is going to do that? I don't know. If they're not, that's the thing, is if they're going to give us chips, I just want to know. Just let us know about it so that we can act accordingly. How's that? Fuck. It's like if they're right, just let me know. I want to know. Just give me the facts. Yes, we're going to give you microchips. And I'll be like, okay, they're going to give us fucking microchips. We shouldn't be fucking arguing over it with each other. That's my point, is that they should be giving us the fucking information so that we know what's really going down. But instead, man, we're just over here fucking with each other. And all sorts of insane shit is going on behind the scenes. And it sucks.
Just let me know my chip date.
I mean,
I'll be there.
Yeah, my ass.
Tell me when I need to be at the chip center.
Yeah, and it's like
I'll put it on my calendar.
Yeah, definitely. Let me know. And then it's like all this shit about, there's all this information about what they think that Black Lives Matter is and what they think that Antifa is. And I said some shit where it's just some stupid shit. I said some stupid shit on Twitter about music or something. I don't even remember what the fuck it was. Oh, I talked shit on buzz from the Melvins and the Proud Boys. So I was like, fuck all this shit. Some Proud Boy from Colorado was like, check this out, motherfucker. And it showed me like a picture of all these like Proud Boy dudes, black and brown and white, all together, being like that they're not racist. And because someone on the thread had said that like Portland Proud Boys are pieces of shit and they're racist and they fucking suck. I don't know anything about Proud Boys other than the bad things I have heard, but admittedly, I don't really, I haven't like done a deep dive on it at the time. So this motherfucker posts this shit. Proud Boys aren't racist. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I do not want to have to research whether or not this shit is factual if they're garbage motherfuckers. Now, I can tell you that in Denver, they've been pieces of shit. But the fact that there is like an open debate about it, it's like we've all known that the KKK are pieces of shit. We've all known that skinheads are pieces of shit. But then there's all these like weird gray area groups. I don't know. I think that's what it is. There's just like too much fucking gray area on everything that is going on, and it makes it impossible to navigate.
Yeah. Well, and especially on Twitter, right? Because I mean, you end up with the scenario of, and like I said before, everything is taken in the worst, most negative light, the least charitable interpretation, et cetera. And then simultaneously, you have this constant exploitation of like any sort of gray area, et cetera, right? So it's like, okay, you have to take some sort of like strong moral stand, or else you're a bootlicker for whatever the other side is. But, simultaneously, no one can ever know anything. And like, well, what if we actually do the research and let's ask some questions about it? So people are kind of forced into this extreme behavior in both directions, right? Whether it's a political argument or a moral argument, it's like you either have to take some extreme stand or else you're being accused of not being hard on whatever the bad thing is, or you're like subjected to this constant trolling of like, oh, well, you're defending this type of person, or you're actually inaccurate because here's some counterexamples, or like, let's do some research on it. And it's a mess. It's an epistemological catastrophe.
Well, and so, for me, I'm just like fucking sitting here, like looking up because, I'm fucking psycho. I'm like over here making art, being crazy, getting all stoned, reading on like everything that there is, trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. And I'm like taking these deep dives and shit. And it is like, well, fuck you up.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you know nothing. You know nothing.
Yeah.
Now, before someone tries to drag me, no, I don't like Proud Boys, motherfucker. I think they suck. But it is just, it was just so much simpler when we were younger, some cliche shit like that. I just feel like there's just too much fucked up information out there, and it sucks, man.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And I mean, I'm not a lib. I would say that I'm definitely on the fucking far left. But that doesn't mean that I don't listen. And that doesn't mean that I don't look into things. Because I want to know and feel in my bones that I am right.
Yeah.
I don't want to just like listen to what my friends say and just decide that we're right. I really, especially when you're making political art, I feel like you should know what you're fucking arguing against. You should know what you're in. You should know what the fuck you're in. So take a look at all of it and then make that stupid ass art and see how you feel then. You know what I mean? You can't just like make an uninformed thing like that. That's just my opinion. It's going to bring it back around to the art thing.
Totally. Well, and to your point, just about trying to dig into stuff and figure out what's going on, that one can say that there's maybe two ways of not knowing what's going on or not knowing what's happening, right? There's a low information way to not know what's going on, and then there's like a high information way to not know what's going on, right? Because if you just don't know very much at all about something, it can be like confusing or frustrating or whatever in one way. And you can end up feeling confused and frustrated once you cross a certain threshold of knowledge as well. I can use a specific example. I was recently listening to a podcast with a guy who was a spy, right? He was embedded in Al-Qaeda and is super knowledgeable about all the stuff going on in the Middle East. And, I'm passively familiar with some of these political arguments, et cetera. And, he mentioned something about like, okay, well, people say that Saudi Arabia funds terrorism. And he's like, well, actually, like, here's what happens. And he breaks down, these like dozens of different schools of thought within certain facets of radical Islam. And it's like, that's a very high information way to not know what's going on compared to like a low information way to not know what's going on. And both of those are challenging, albeit in different ways.
Yeah. It's fucking bullshit. We should know what's going on.
How do we find out, Ethan? What do we do?
Shit, man. If I had the answer to that, we would have not talked about it. We all know what the answer is.
We wouldn't have to make art about it.
Yeah, and then that's the thing is, so we're on this topic. It's like you're like, how what's the way? And I'm like, shit, I don't know. So I just get mad and I make this angry shit. Because that's all you can do is just be mad about it,
So actually, would you say that anger is the dominant emotion?
Anger and spite always.
Interesting.
I mean, unless it's depressing, but generally it's always
Anger and spite. What and then the goal is to horrify the listener or viewer with the intensity of the anger and spite, or what?
No, I'm just trying to communicate a specific set of I'm just kind of trying to communicate the vibe, of how it's feeling to write in that state of mind. I mean, anger and spite is like a super simplified way of breaking it down. There's a lot more than that. But I think that anger is usually what pushes people to play this kind of extreme music and make this extreme art anyway. You're not making crazy shit like this because you're in a good mood.
Yeah. Although, I would say for myself, I wouldn't consider myself to be a particularly angry person. And I definitely think that some of the, attraction to metal comes from like darkness, but not necessarily anger, right? Maybe more like depressive and like being sort of interested in like the horrors of reality, but not necessarily angry per se.
I hear you. But then I would be like, well, how can you not get mad at the horrors of reality?
Yeah. Some of us are find them more interesting than enraging, I would say.
Fuck, dude.
That it's there's I don't know. It's really interesting just to hear the ideas of like, okay, this is the goal is predominantly to communicate like a specific emotion and to actually press that across.
Yeah. I mean, it's about several things. Being super heavy, creating a vibe, communicating a specific set of emotions for whatever that song or whatever that thing is, all kind of wrapped into one, and trying to rock too.
Yeah, always gotta get the rock in.
Yeah, I don't want to pretend like I don't like to rock.
It's always got to be there. So Denver has become a hotbed of extreme metal, which is pretty interesting. And as an outsider who's been to Denver for fitness events many times and never for extreme metal related events, what do outsiders not understand about Denver's extreme music scene? Obviously things are changing with COVID rapidly all the time, but potentially pre-COVID.
Well, when things are normal, Denver has a little bit of something for everybody. I think that all of the bands try to sound not like each other. It's bigger than it's ever been. You know, we used to be a cow town, then we got weed, and then we blew up, and then all sorts of people came. It really made the metal scene blow up a lot, and so, but Denver has always kind of had this thing where it tried to have its own sound and its own thing. But you know, for a long time, the biggest thing to come out of here was Fall Carnage. You know,
Yeah.
So, you know, with all these people coming and all that, it still has this, I would say, like a original town that really tries to be original and tries to do its own thing, and it's cool. You know, I like it here. I've been all over the world, and I haven't left here. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, because when I was growing up in Chicago, there was a very clearly delineated hardcore scene, right? And I was sort of simultaneously a part of like a suburban hardcore scene and like a downtown Chicago hardcore scene. And then both of those scenes sort of fizzled out. I think that my generation was probably the last generation that like really had bands and was like part of a quote unquote scene. And, you know, I sort of didn't realize how, I guess, valuable that was until it was sort of gone. It's like, oh, interesting. What happened here?
So we'll go through periods where young kids aren't making new bands and shit is all fucked up. I'd say like every 5 years, it just kind of sucks. But I feel like within like the last couple, I've seen like a lot of kids just like coming up and starting punk houses and like all this shit like when I was a kid. So I feel like Denver has a really bright future ahead of it in terms of cool new bands that are going to happen and bands that are already existing, you know. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I
worry about it. Like, it is important to echo what you're saying. Yeah, it is important, and I have kind of witnessed that where I felt like it was dying for a little bit. And it was bad, shows were bad, and all this stuff, but it just kind of bounces back here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and for you as someone who's involved in playing in bands and booking shows and things like that, I mean, do you see it as just something that's inherently cyclical, or are there certain things that need to be in place in order for there to be, like you said, like a crop of kids starting bands to replace the ones that are breaking up or whatever?
Well, I mean, you know, man, I think that, yeah, it is important to kind of have younger bands to kind of keep it going. And I do shows in bars, and I'll do like DIY shows and stuff, which is kind of how I stay connected and know what's going on with younger kids, because they'll be coming to the shows and I'll put their names on and shit. But I think that, yeah, like if all of a sudden these kids now who are like just turning 21 and all that, or like 19 or whatever, if they're like the last wave of people to make heavy music in Denver, it'll fucking suck. I would just really hate to see it fizzle out and meet an end like that. You know, I like wouldn't have anything cool in my life without heavy music. Like none of the cool shit I've done has been from anything other than playing heavy music. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I really hate to see that go away. Be fucked.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm in it. I'm booking the shows and booking the tours and playing them and all that shit. So it means a lot to me, you know. But we'll see what happens after this fucking virus shit.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously a challenge for any sort of musical situation.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I'm hoping for is that, you know, if it all kind of dies down and we get to be able to go back to living the way we were, that it'll be like sicker than ever because we've all had to suffer without it for a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, myself, I'd be taking this shit for granted. I'd be all pissed because I have to go to a show on like a weeknight. Just like, oh, fuck. But now I'll go to a show any weeknight. You know what I'm saying? I'm ready to get back out there. I don't give a shit.
Ready to push mosh? Like, I'll be there push moshing.
We don't know about that, but I'm definitely ready to go out and see everybody, you know.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I'm curious about, is that in a larger city like Chicago, it can be kind of interesting and challenging in the sense that there's so much stuff going on that the opportunity cost for people to go to a local show is higher, right? Because it's like, oh, I could do this other thing instead. I already went to 2 shows this month, and I have, tickets to this larger national tour coming through the House of Blues. I'm just not going to go to this like local show.
We have that
right?
same shit now, which didn't used to be a thing.
Yeah, interesting. So I'm curious if the disruption to whatever the equilibrium is in music scenes from COVID potentially allows an opportunity for like local scenes to bounce back earlier and to build that more local camaraderie.
I mean, I really hope so. I hope that everybody can put aside their bullshit and we all come back out and all that, which sounds super hippie of me, but
yeah.
I hope we can all get along. I don't think that's so controversial to say.
Yeah. 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 Well, and I think it's not even just a matter of getting along, but it's a matter of like actually being excited to see bands from your area.
Yeah.
Right. Because I mean, in Chicago, you get this, you probably have seen the same thing. You get this dynamic of like, okay, this is a local band that's played a bunch of times. I've seen them enough. I know they're going to play again. I'm not necessarily interested in going to see them. And then when they cross over a certain threshold of popularity, then all of a sudden everyone is like, oh yeah, I was like the biggest fan. I was there the whole time, etc. Right. And it's like, okay, does being shut out of music for a while, does that change the way that people treat their local artists?
I mean, probably, but I do want to say one thing about Denver. I feel like we're pretty good about that still. That people go out and we'll see an all local show and shit. We haven't gotten that yet, where people won't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hope it's good shows for everybody for like the next decade. You know what I mean? I definitely hope that. And when we roll through places and shit, and it's like a big city sometimes, I mean, in the past especially, people would be like, oh, well, like these 3 shows just came through, people aren't going to come out. Like I see that shit on a national level too, which I know that we're not from there, but we're playing with like 3 local bands.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like if people were coming out to see those locals and were enthused, it'll kind of help everybody, really.
Yeah. Totally. And so for you then, in terms of like having at least some whatever pull as far as booking shows or being in a band that people would potentially come to see, do you see anything that you can or should be doing to try to like stabilize or grow the local scene, especially as music returns? I
mean, I book tours for like 5 bands out of Denver, and I'm constantly throwing shows here, and I'm constantly bringing bands through. I fucking give back to my community, and always have, and I always will.
Yeah. Well, sure. Well, in that sense, like what should other people be doing, right? If they are involved in their scene somewhere and they want to make sure that like, okay, if and when music does return, like what are you thinking about? What should people be thinking about?
That's hard to answer. Maybe pass out flyers for like that one guy in town who's been doing it and will continue to do it when you don't want to pass out flyers anymore. Something like that. I feel like because a lot of times it like lays on the shoulders of like 4 or 5 people in town who do the shit. Obviously if they like work for AEG or something, they have a bunch of people doing shit for them. But like independent promoters, this is what people should be doing. You should be helping independent promoters because that's who's eating the most shit. Are guys who don't have a corporation behind them. They don't have a job. So yeah, people should be thinking about that. Supporting independent promoters, 100%.
Yeah, and support meaning just go to shows that they're putting on, helping promote those shows.
Yeah, go to shows they're putting on. Put a little share on that. Put a like on that. Pass out a couple of flyers. Maybe say some shit about it. Just kind of help these people get along because they don't have a lot of help. A lot of times it's usually just them by themselves and like one other sucker who believes in the dream. You know what I mean? So yeah, help out independent promoters because they've got no help right now from anybody. There's like a organization. It's called NITO, but I can't remember the National Something Touring Organization. And the booking agency I work with is part of it. And a lot of independent promoters are a part of it. And it's basically like a group of people that got together to lobby for Congress for us to get some sort of assistance during this COVID shit, because larger people like Live Nation and AEG and stuff got help from the government, but no one independent did. So that's something to think about. When it comes back, those people have been basically not eating since March.
Yeah. Is that the same as the Save Our Stages legislation?
Yeah, it's just a separate. So there's NITA and NITO, or NIVA and NITO or NITO, and they're all kind of interconnected. And Save Our Stages is part of that.
Cool. Yeah, we'll find all the links to that stuff and include that in the show notes for people as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Independent clubs, independent promoters. Those are the people that you should be thinking about supporting when shows come back. And there's clubs closing all over the fucking country right now that are independently run. That shit is scary because, for a band like me, we need a mid-sized level room, and that's what's closing. I don't need to play in a 1,000-cap room. I wish I did, but I don't. It's like the 250, 350, 500 cap rooms that are going to shit. It sucks.
Yeah.
Those are the bands. Usually, if you're into extreme music, those are the rooms you're seeing these bands in. So, yeah, support those people. And also, I don't know, maybe think about starting a warehouse or something, because a lot of these places are going to close. And it's going to be fucked all over the country. And I think that people need to think about going into industrial areas again, maybe, and thinking about doing warehouse shows and shit. I lived in 5 DIY places in my time. And I feel like, that's something that we might need to try and bring back, which is like much harder to do now. But that's just something else to think about. Like, we're going to be left to fend for ourselves. Underground music and underground promoters and clubs and all this shit. We're going to be out here fending for ourselves. So that's who people should really be trying to support.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about warehouses, right? Because again, you think about the economics of like, okay, we have this venue that is not going to be able to operate in anything even resembling its former business model, probably until sometime potentially late 2021. Right? Like, okay, that very, very challenging unless you have an extremely accommodating landlord or significant changes in legislation. But then simultaneously, the commercial real estate market is going to probably be collapsing and totally different in a lot of urban areas. So there may be some opportunity for, warehouse spaces, maybe the equivalent of like the Halloween stores that just like pop up and rent random things for a month. It's like, all right, cool. Here's the venue for a month.
I mean, yeah, man, that shit is very necessary. If I had the money, I would try to do it again. It's just, I've always lived in the places where I was doing shows, and that gets fucked up for you. And I'm too old for that shit now. But I wish that I could. I wish that I could just have like a solid warehouse. There's a place here in Denver. There's a couple of places that are still going, and I like help out at this place called Rhinoceropolis. But that's like 12 people who don't live there with this like huge bill. It's just hard right now. And so I think that all those places, like not all those places, but some of those places are going to dissolve, and people are going to have to start figuring it out.
Yeah.
Like a band like Primitive Man won't be able to come through if there isn't a small club or a place like this. This won't happen.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a really interesting point, right? Because it's like, okay, if the venues collapse, then the second order effects of that are like tours literally can't happen, because even if there is a venue in, let's say, Chicago and Denver, right? Like, okay, well, how are you going to route a tour if there's no venue in any other city? What are you going to do?
And I have played tours like that where you're doing shit. So from being from Denver, we're in the middle of the country, and then, many years ago, like the early 2000s, you're driving for like 12 to 16 hours to get to a place for you to play, because there's less internet shit then, but there was just nowhere good for a band like yours to play. I drove in an old band. I drove from somewhere in Iowa all the way out to Chicago for like a house show that didn't happen. Like I've had happen in your city. You know, I mean, it's just. I don't want to see bands go back to that because I feel like for a while there, you could always find like a small town that had a little bit of something. I mean, I even had like 2 really sick shows in Wichita, Kansas, which were right next to Kansas. I have family in Wichita, and historically, it has fucking sucked. Now, someone will be mad, and they'll tell me it hasn't, but no, it sucked. Went through there and it was sick, you know what I mean? And all those opportunities just might go away. That's going to be really sad and fucked up, make it even harder to tour. People think it was bad before. Imagine like having to drive 16 hours and $150. It's dark as fuck.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not the economics of that don't work out too well.
I'm getting depressed. It's like depressing to live in it, and it's even more depressing to talk about what we're gonna have to fix when it's fucking over.
Yeah. Well, if there's a potential positive in that, it might be that somehow just the entire equilibrium being disrupted creates more opportunity, and there's more buy-in for local music, which gives more leverage to people to actually be able to create like local scenes that are solid. And that people are grateful to participate in. That's my flyer for a potential positive out of it.
No, I mean, absolutely. And the thing is, I'm sitting here talking about this, not even worrying about if Denver will have a solid local scene, because I'm just like, oh yeah, we will. It's sick right now. You know what I mean? Like all those people are still around and shit. I think it will have some positives for sure, because you're going to see local shows before you see touring bands. So,
yeah,
I can't wait for that shit. The last show I played before lockdown was all locals.
Was there any push moshing?
It was a noise show, so
okay.
There was just a lot of like drinking beer and looking into the void.
Yeah,
it was cool.
Yeah, chewing glass and staring into the abyss.
You know, I am not sick like that, which I really wish that I could chew glass and do like, really cool performance art shit like that, but I'm soft, so. Justice Yeldon was a maniac, like, much respect. That is real shit. But, like, when I think about noise in terms of heavy, too, like, I'll think about that sometimes when I'm getting ready to play a show. I'm just like, what the fuck are you doing? You're, like, not even doing anything cool like that.
Dude, you're just twiddling knobs. It's not even...
It's so weak.
Yeah, very soft noise artist.
I know, you know what? Maybe when we come back, I'll really have to, like, take it to the next level. So it'll be so fucked up from all this time off. Who knows what's going to happen?
Might as well. You could learn like all those crazy David Blaine tricks, right? I feel like that would work well as like a noise show. Like the one where he just stabs the needle through his whole arm while he's talking to Ricky Gervais. Dude, that would go over great at a noise show.
I don't know what the fuck is up that. You made a pact with the devil or something. I don't know if does all that fucking shit. It makes me feel very fucking uncomfortable. I don't even want to learn how to do that shit. Stay the fuck away from me. If I saw David Blaine out somewhere, he'd be like, hey guys, I'd be like, get the fuck away from me, man. No way. I want to see that shit. Hell no.
Love it. Well, Ethan, we've been talking for a little over an hour. Let's tell the people where they should listen to the new Primitive Man record, where they should look at your visual art, and whatever else they should do if they're interested in such activities.
So Primitive Man has a new record called Immersion coming out tomorrow. You can order it from Relapse, not us, because we're not touring, so we don't have any. So no fucking point. They can ship it. Primitive Man is on Bandcamp and Facebook and all these other places. When you type in Primitive Man Band, we're like the only thing to come up. So it's easy to find. What else? My art is at hellsimulation.com. Primitive Man's website is primitivemandoom.com. And that has the links to all that shit there. Yeah, that's it.
Well, what about, so you've put out a bunch of different projects, right? I mean, we talked about some grindcore stuff, some noise, ambient type stuff. Is there something in your discography that you think is underrated or underappreciated that you would want people to check out?
Well, I put out a record in May under a project called Many Blessings, and the album is called Emanation Body, and Translation Lost Records put that out, and may have copies left for sale. And then I have like some tapes and shit on the Many Blessings Bandcamp. And I play in a kind of a death grind band called Vermin, but we haven't done anything in 3 years, so someday we'll do something.
Yeah.
you can listen to that everywhere, Bandcamp and all that stuff. But yeah, if I could tell people to check out anything, it would be Immersion from Primitive Man and Emanation Body by Many Blessings. That's the most current stuff going on right now. And hellsimulation.com for art.
Yeah, that Many Blessings record is awesome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
It's got some nice sounds to it.
Yeah, so that's the tamest thing that I've done. That's like me really trying to pull it back on the harsh, which we didn't even talk about that. But yeah, I kind of tried to pull it back a little bit with that one.
Yeah, there's more space on that, just some space and a little pluck here and there.
Yeah,
It's not just a crushing wall of sound.
Yeah, but then I put out like 2 harsh tapes after that, so I don't even know what the fuck I'm
Yeah,
doing.
no one would think that you were going soft.
Yeah, can't have that. Never that.
Thanks for listening. If you like the show, the best thing to do would be to send it to one of your friends who also likes podcasts. If you want more, I have an email list where I send out a weekly update with all the podcasts I've recorded and articles that I've written. I also include my favorite things that I've been reading or listening to as well. You can sign up for that at www.toddneve.com. That's I before E, or you can open up the show notes in your podcast player and click the link in there.